Uproar over the tragic death of Catherine Steinle at the hands of an illegal immigrant. 2016 GOP presidential candidate Senator Rand Paul has now introduced legislation intended to crack down on sanctuary cities. Joining us now for background on this new bill is the author of Taking a Stand, Moving Beyond Partisan Politics to Unite America. 2016 Republican presidential candidate, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. Senator, how are you?
Very good, Sean. Thanks for having me.
I read that Lamar Alexander and John Cornyn, your colleagues today, voted down an attempt to put this in the education bill. Is that true?
Well, I'm not aware of how they voted on it, but I do know that what we do need to do is we need to tell cities like San Francisco they have to obey the federal law. And immigration is a federal law, and states all the time obey this. If you're wanted for shoplifting and you're held for shoplifting in Ohio, but you committed murder in Michigan, Ohio never releases you and just say, go on your way. They release you to Michigan. Should be the same in San Francisco. If you're wanted for a petty crime, but Immigration Service wants you for another crime, when you're released, you should go into federal jurisdiction or federal prison.
Yeah, well, I'm reading, and this was on Conservative Review, Republican leaders are blocking a vote on an amendment that would put an end to liberal cities thwarting federal immigration law. So you want to end, what, we have 296 sanctuary cities in the country. You want to put an end to it, and they're blocking an attempt to do that. Why?
Well, I think sometimes they just don't want to address facts that are out there. I'm not sure about this particular episode, but I do know that we will attempt to get a vote. That's not our amendment. It might be somebody else's amendment, but we're going to attempt to get a vote on this. And I think there's a good chance that we can pass it because it makes so much sense. If someone is wanted for a federal crime and they're being held by a local jail, when the local jail releases them, they should be released into federal custody. And this is something that President Obama changed, because it used to be that this was interpreted as being a mandatory hold on a prisoner. And President Obama, through executive order and through executive interpretation, has now said that it's voluntary. But if you're wanted for a federal crime, you should be held and not released to the general public. And it's a real tragedy that this young woman lost her life because San Francisco apparently don't care about whether or not they're releasing dangerous criminals into the public.
Did you see that the escaped Mexican drug lord El Chapo, that literally he had his wife, ordered his wife to give birth to their children in America so that they would be American citizens, so-called anchor babies? The AP reported on that today. When is that practice going to end?
What we can't have is a lawless nation, and that's sort of what we have now is a lawless border. And people have talked a lot about what immigration reform or security measures are necessary. Really what we need is an enforcer. We haven't had a Republican or a Democrat in the White House who is willing to enforce immigration laws. Just enforcing the laws on the books would improve things now. But we have sort of a lawlessness when San Francisco thinks they can thumb their nose and not obey the federal law.
All right, what is your reaction to this nuclear deal announced today? And what do you think the Senate, the House could do to stop it, if anything?
You know, I've been very skeptical of the Iranians' intentions, and I think anything that leaves them with a sufficient nuclear capacity to enrich is a problem, and I think this agreement does that. I've also said over time that I think the sanctions, if there was going to be sanction relief, that it should be delayed until we see sufficient Iranian compliance. And then the third thing about the agreement that bothers me is that it allows for sales of advanced weapons, like even ballistic missiles, to Iran. I think it would be a huge mistake for the world to begin selling advanced weaponry to Iran again. So I won't be able to support the agreement because I think it doesn't address any of these things. I did vote for the Corker bill, though, and I think it's sometimes mischaracterized. The Corker bill says that the agreement does have to come back and be voted on. The president objected to Corker's bill, and in the end it was passed, and the president went along with it. But the bill does have to come back and be voted on, and so there will be a chance for all of us to decide whether we agree or disagree.
But you didn't need the Corker bill. It's in the Constitution. You're a libertarian. You're a constitutional conservative. Why did you need that bill when it's in the Constitution that, as the Senate has, needs two-thirds approval?
Yeah, but here's the problem. Let's say that I say it's a treaty, and I do agree that it's a treaty. So I'm with you. I think it's a treaty, but the president says it isn't a treaty. So what we have is a conflict,
so take him
so
to
we
court.
vote on it.
So take it to court.
But here's the thing.
Don't give him, don't reduce.
I know, but here's what happens. If we vote to say it's a treaty, the president then vetoes it, it would take two-thirds to override it. So really where we are with the Corker bill, it's going to take 2/3 to override the president's veto, which is exactly the same scenario we would have with a treaty. So I think Corker's bill is essentially the same as whether we vote on whether it's a treaty or not, because we will ultimately have to overcome a presidential veto in either scenario. So I think they're essentially equivalent.
It seems to me that Congress is far too willing to cede power to the executive branch, and I think that's going to come back and bite us.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's the biggest problem facing our country is we've allowed the presidency to go so strong and the Congress to grow so small, and that we have given up authority to the president. Without question, it's the biggest problem we face in our country.
Well, let's see what the Democrats do here. A number of them have said that they don't like the at least talking points on the bill, and when we get time to examine it more closely, we'll see where they stand. All right, Senator, good to see you. Thank you.